Hello, everyone. Welcome to our newest episode of Coping Together. I am so excited to be joined by Emilie Mitchell and Shannan Webster from Victim Service Center. And we're kind of here to talk about our episode, and it is going to be titled Victim Survivor Thriver. What is Victim Service Center? So with that, our first question is, what is the Victim Service Center? Is it part of like a bigger national organization, or is it just something on like a local scale?
Yeah, definitely. So first off, Mary, thank you so much for having us on Coping Together. We're both really, really excited to be here. And we think that what the Mental Health Association for Central Florida does is amazing. And we're just really happy that we can partner together and collaborate. So we're glad to be here. So like you mentioned, my name's Emilie Mitchell. I am the education coordinator at the Victim Service Center of Central Florida. My job is to really go out and educate people on different topics such as healthy relationships, sexual assault, stalking, anti-bullying, and active bystander awareness, just to normalize the conversation about these various topics and in an effort to end violence really in the community. So I just wanted to give like a brief introduction of what I do. Shannan, did you want to give an introduction? Then we can get into what the Victim Service Center is.
Sure. So I'm Shannan Webster. I'm the VSC Volunteer and Outreach Coordinator. So my mission really is to try to reach those people who want to give back, as well as reaching people who need our services. I mean, we'll go into what those are in a minute, but right now that's also changed with COVID. And so I work really closely with Emilie, trying to get our prevention and education awareness message out there too.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you guys.
Yeah. We work a lot together. But what the Victim Service Center does is, first off, it's a nonprofit organization that provides free, individualized services and confidential services to survivors and victims of any kind of trauma in the community. And we do that in a variety of different ways. First off, we do have crisis intervention. We have a 24-hour helpline, which is 407-500-HEAL, HEAL. I'm sure that Mary will tag that in there for y'all. But that is 24 hours. That'll be answered by one of our amazing crisis counselors and victim advocates that are all master's level and trained. And anyone can call that at any time to talk to someone about if they're going through a crisis in that moment, those kinds of things, or if they need some resources, those kinds of things. So there's that. We also do have counseling and therapy services that are also free and confidential. And those are individualized. We also have group sessions and support groups too. That could include the mixed gender survivors meetup. We also have a men's group and a women's group. We also do have an LGBTQ+ or rainbow resilience group and a Spanish speaking group as well. And we also do education and outreach, which is what what Shannan and I do at the Victim Service Center. And it's also important to bring up that, and we'll go more into it a little bit, but the Victim Service Center is also the certified rape crisis center for Orange, Seminole, and Osceola County. We have offices in all of those counties. I'm actually in the Orlando office today. And we also do the forensic exams or rape kits, where we collect DNA evidence. One of our amazing sexual assault nurse examiners, or SANE nurses that are certified just to do that sort of thing, can collect DNA evidence for someone who has gone through a sexual assault within 5 days or 120 hours of this sexual assault occurring, which is known as an acute case. Then they can meet us at one of our confidential forensic exam locations with a victim advocate and a SANE nurse to collect that DNA evidence and store that evidence for them. So that's just one of the many, many, many services that we provide, and they're all free. But Shannan, feel free to jump in if I missed anything there.
Yeah, I think the free is always the thing we like to highlight the most, is that, you know, in Central Florida, or really in any region, it's really hard to find mental health resources that are completely free, or, you know, something that you can qualify for. That it's not on a sliding scale. And we'll go into like what qualifies as actually receiving services. But you know, if you qualify, we're never going to make you pay a dime or anything like that to get the services. And to kind of go back to that original question about if we're a national organization, we're not. We cover 3 counties. We cover Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. Obviously, if someone calls our helpline, we don't necessarily ask, hey, where are you right now? Unless there's a safety situation happening. But in that case, we'll just help anyone that calls our helpline. So if someone in Nebraska stumbles across our helpline, they're more than welcome to call us and get help if that's what they would like. All of our advocates are certified like counselors. They have, a lot of them are registered interns working on licensure, but they're all master's level or higher. So we really put a lot of work and effort into making sure that all of our team are as trained as possible, ready to help anyone that needs it. So we cover these local 3 counties. There are other victim service center agencies that are around. So our name is Victim Service Center of Central Florida. We're not something like Salvation Army that has localized ones that then are part of a bigger organization. There are organizations that are very similar to what we do. Each county in the state of Florida has to have a certified rape crisis center, and we happen to be the one for these local 3 counties. So they're all going to be a little bit different, but do similar work.
Wow, it seems like Victim Service Center of Central Florida is a truly comprehensive resource for those who have experienced sexual trauma and sexual violence and domestic violence, any type of violence. With that being said, what are the criteria for receiving services for Victim Service Center?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's really the population that the Victim Service Center focuses on are those who have gone through trauma. And trauma can look a lot of different ways, of course, and it's complicated and it looks different for everyone. But among those, just some examples that can include sexual violence, it can include childhood sexual abuse, but it can also include violent crimes. For example, the Pulse shooting, that was a really traumatic event for a lot of people, and a lot of our clients came in after that. And so it could be a home invasion, that kind of thing. So trauma, it really depends on the individual, and we focus specifically on that. That being said, it doesn't matter when the trauma occurred. It could have happened yesterday. It could have happened years and years ago. And actually, most of our clients that we provide free therapeutic services for are childhood sexual abuse survivors. And we actually did some internal research and found that on average, it takes about 8 years for a survivor of a sexual violence or sexual abuse to seek services from that victimization. And so we understand that at the Victim Service Center. We understand that healing looks different for everyone, and that trauma, that healing journey looks different for everyone. It takes time. And so we're really glad that we're able to provide those services no matter when the trauma occurred. So that's really the criteria, I should say. Also, Shannon, if you wanted to jump in on that.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, all of our services are free. That's not something that someone has to qualify for, so it's not a sliding scale system. It's just free for everybody. Normally, if you have your own insurance, you might be able to be seen faster if you find your own like counselor or mental health provider. So it's really up to the individual. How our services kind of work is everyone's going to start on our counseling side. So those are our more immediate needs, assessing where you're at, what your trauma is, what you want to actually be seen for, because not everyone wants to come and do long-term therapy for years and years, but some people, that is what they want. If they do need longer-term therapy, then they get referred to our therapy department, and that's where we have a little bit of a wait to see our therapist, and then from there, that's your established therapist for as long as you might need it. There's no caps on those services, so it's not like you have 3 free and then the rest are seen by insurance. And this is really important for people who are underinsured, as well as for people who might be working on their immigration status, or they are not in the country legally. That's not anything that we care about. We care about making sure that that person is seen. It is important to note that you do have to be 12 and older to be seen by us. If the trauma occurred when they were under 12, they're more than welcome to come now if they're like 13, 14, things like that. If you're now 52 and the trauma happened when you were 7, as Emilie mentioned, a lot of our clients are childhood trauma survivors, so they can come and be seen now. For our acute side, it's a little bit different. We'll probably go into that more when we talk about what it means to be a certified rape crisis center, because then it has to do with DNA collection. But as of now, it's 12 and older. For a lot of our support groups, we ask you to be 18 and older, and that just has to do with mandated reporting, so that everyone in the space feels comfortable. And also, a 13-year-old and a 40-year-old really aren't going to jive in the same support group space. So those are going to be a little bit different when people come in, but we really do our best to work with people. If someone calls us and their services that they're seeking aren't something that matches ours, we usually refer them someplace else, a lot of times to the Mental Health Association of Central Florida, to like find someone more localized that might help them. So if someone is experiencing, depression, things like that, that isn't necessarily something that they can come and be seen by us for. If, however, that depression is something that's stemming from an underlying trauma that they haven't addressed yet, that's when they would come to the Victim Service Center, if they would like to. But it's a really great service. If you think you qualify, we always say just give us a call. Did we talk about secondary survivors, Emilie?
No, I wanted to bring that up. So we have two kind of terms, primary survivors and secondary survivors. So primary survivors are those who have gone through the victimization firsthand. They're the ones who actually went through the sexual assault, the child sexual abuse, or perhaps they witnessed that shooting of home invasion. But the secondary survivor is that person's people, their loved ones, maybe their partner or their friend who are supporting that person now. And they're also affected by the trauma, which is really important to highlight. And because of that, the Victim Service Center is also able to give services to secondary survivors as well, which is really important. And I also wanted to highlight that we do a lot of counseling and therapy as well, but we do crisis intervention, and a lot of our victim advocates, some of the services we provide is just walking that victim or survivors through a process. For example, maybe they want to apply for victims' compensation. Our victim advocates can help that through that process. And like Shannan mentioned, if someone calls and they're looking for some kind of support, we have a lot of partners like the Mental Health Association in the community that we're connected with, that we can help them through that too. So it's not just counseling as well. That's a lot of what we do, but we do a lot of connection and helping survivors walk through that journey.
It seems a lot of what I'm hearing is that you guys are really committed to breaking down barriers to treatment. I think that's such an important service that you guys are providing. And with that being said, so what does it actually mean to be a certified rape crisis center? Shannan, I know you brought that up.
Yeah, so in the state of Florida, every single county is going to have a certified rape crisis center. The Florida Council Against Sexual Violence is an overseeing organization in the state of Florida who determines who meets the criteria that they've outlined. I think there's like 137 now. There might be more that you have to meet. And so the reason we meet all of these is because that's what allows us to do the best care possible. So some of those are having a helpline 24 hours a day, which we obviously have, 407-500-HEAL, just got to plug that in. And so when, let's say, someone calls 911 and reports having a sexual assault, a sex crimes detective will usually come out and meet that victim. At that time, that's when they would call the Certified Rape Crisis Center. So we have something called a sexual assault response team. So we're part of that. We meet with first responders, like police officers, hospitals, EMTs, anyone who might encounter a victim first. We all meet together to talk about what that protocol looks like. And that's part of being the Certified Rape Crisis Center, is having that sexual assault response team. So they all know who we are. And so when they encounter a victim, they know to call us. If there were multiple centers, it would get a little bit confusing, because then when a victim comes up, you have too many options to choose from. So by just having one, it kind of streamlines the process a little bit. At that time, once the victim is identified, they ask if they would like a victim advocate to respond to them, to their case. That's when our victim advocates would then come out. So sometimes it's a detective calling us, it could be a nurse, it could be the victim themselves if they stumble across us on Google, which we try to make it as easy as possible to find us that way. Then we would respond with the victim. In Orange County and Seminole County, we actually have care facilities where we have our nurses meet the victim with police officers, sometimes by themselves. It just depends on what the situation calls for, if they would like to report to law enforcement or not. If they report to law enforcement, that's usually when they would come in. And the sexual assault nurse examiner or SANE nurse that Emilie mentioned earlier would be dispatched as well to come out and collect that evidence. One of the things that we try to help with that's part of that like crisis intervention is also legal services if someone decides that they would like to pursue a case. Being a certified rape crisis center, that makes it to where our victim advocates cannot be subpoenaed. So anything that happens between the victim and our victim advocate is protected. So, you know, it's never going to come out in court. We're never going to say this is how they responded. So it can't be used against them, but we also are not testifying on their behalf. However, our sane nurses can testify on behalf of the victim. So if it does go to trial, then they can say, this is what I saw. They can act as an expert witness as they collected that evidence. So all of those protections come into place by being the certified rape crisis center. And it helps also for victims compensation that Emilie mentioned. So in the state of Florida, if you'd like to file for victims compensation after a sexual battery, which sexual battery is the actual charge legally, then you have to go to the certified rape crisis center to get that filed. There's some other stipulations. You have to file a police report within a year, all of these other technicalities that we can help people navigate through. There's victim compensation for other types of crimes that we can help with, but mostly we're seeing sexual battery victims compensation come through our doors because they have to, which that's a little bit streamlined now, but there's other things like domestic battery victims compensation. You have to go to the certified domestic violence shelter, which we are not. In Orange County, it's Harbor House. So that's an important distinction for a lot of people, is that the certification program, it was put into place to make it a little bit more streamlined for victims. And so we have that in Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. There's some technicalities in Seminole County, but mostly it's just so that we're the ones that get called by first responders to come out, and that we're the ones that are protected legally between that client interaction with the victim.
Thank you for all that information. It brings a lot of clarity to what exactly a rape crisis center is. And with that, it kind of ties into what our episode title is, Victim, Survivor, Thriver. What do those words mean to you, and how do you define them as your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, our name is Victim Service Center, and every time I'm out doing outreach, which I missed going out and doing outreach, people would ask me about that name a lot, whether they're upset by it or they're confused by it. Some people don't identify with the word victim. Some people do identify with the word victim. And it all really comes down to personal choice. However, at the Victim Service Center, we kind of break it down into 3 categories of victim, survivor, thriver. And I actually pulled up a sheet that we give clients on their first appointment. So I'm going to read a little bit about that. So it says, although the terms victim and survivor are often used interchangeably, the terms victim, survivor, and thriver often reflect attitudinal distinctions as follows. So if you're in that victim mindset, you might be feeling like your life is out of control, you're helpless, you identify as a victim, you might be in pain, you might be numb, you might be feeling defeated, you might still actively feel like you're in that traumatic experience. So it's usually someone who it just recently happened, they haven't gotten any services yet. So it's very fresh. There's also going to be other places like a law enforcement agency that are going to have their own victim services department. And that's really where Victim Service Center comes from, is aligning with those services so that we're easier to find. For us, we kind of identify survivor as someone who is beginning to feel stronger. They're seeking those services. They're coping day to day. They're living their life as best as they can in the moment, but they're really not able to be fully looking towards the future. So a thriver is someone who's committed to moving forward. They're self-determined. They feel joy day to day. They're reaching out to their support systems, things like that. They know how to manage their emotions. They know how to manage their symptoms. So they've really moved from just surviving to thriving in their life now. That doesn't mean that their life is easy. It doesn't mean that they're not feeling triggered all the time. It means that they know how to manage it and they know how to get help when they need it. So we really try to move people from that victim mindset through survivor and thriver by seeding services. So victim might be someone who, you know, was traumatized as a child and never received help. A survivor might be someone who's actively seeking mental health counseling, but maybe has some issues regulating their emotions, or they're still feeling triggered very often and don't know how to cope with that. And a thriver could be someone who is well in their therapeutic journey or past that therapeutic journey and now has those support systems built up and those skills that they've built with their counselor.
Yeah, and I think what's really important that Shannan mentioned is that it really is up to the individual on how they want to identify. These words can come with a lot of connotations that mean a lot of different things for people. The most important thing is that the Victim Service Center has its name so it's easier to find. And we understand that these terms have a lot of different connotations, and that survivors or victims or thrivers have the right to identify themselves that way. And also, I wanted to highlight that healing is definitely not linear. It's not like you're a victim and then you're a survivor, then you're right. It goes all which ways. But yeah, I'm really glad that we were able to have this space to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that it's really important that you guys have that vocabulary, because it kind of, to me, I feel like it would give people the words to kind of identify where they're at in their healing. And I think that's really powerful to kind of give people some of that back, and they kind of know where they're at. And that brings us to our last question. So how has your organization specifically been affected by COVID, and how have you adapted?
Yeah, so COVID has affected a lot of different organizations, and in the Victim Service Center as well. We have always remained open, which is really important to highlight. So I'm in the office right now, actually. And so we just have, how it's changed a little bit is maybe I come in twice a week instead of every day of the week, for example. But our 24-hour helpline has always been there. We are always open. Our doors are always open. As a certified rape crisis center, we do have to be open, actually. We're an essential service. And so that's really important to highlight. But perhaps we have screening questions, that kind of thing. We clean and do different precautions for COVID, that kind of thing. You have to wear your mask. We do temperature checks. So those kinds of things. But also, as the education coordinator, my role has changed a lot under COVID, because I would normally go out and do what we're doing now, or perhaps a training in person and see people, and that just can't happen. And so instead, we've had to adapt and bring our trainings online. And so I've been doing a lot of Zoom calls and doing online webinars. I've been recording things like that. And also, a lot of my role is outreach too. And so in an effort to do that, we created something called a podcast. We call it the VSC podcast, which you'll be on. I'm really excited about.
So excited.
And that's just really an effort to continue outreach so that people know, the VSC is here, and also to just bring awareness and various topics. So for example, healthy relationships during COVID was a topic, and stalking was a topic. Just different things to raise awareness in an effort for outreach as well. So that's really kind of how my role has changed, and how we've had to adapt, basically doing a lot more social media, a lot more of these kinds of things. And yeah, that's basically what we had to do, kind of.
For sure. One of the other big things is, I know Mary, you mentioned earlier, we're kind of doing our best to break down barriers. One of the things we've always really wanted to explore was telehealth or teletherapy. Mm-hmm. And coronavirus really pushed that timetable forward by a lot. Yeah. So now all of our therapy is being done via telehealth or teletherapy, however you want to call it. And that's a really amazing service. For some people that won't always work, we are still at the therapist's discretion, as well as the client's offering, if they want to come in face to face. But usually with the long-term therapy clients, they're more than comfortable seeing their therapist that's already established over something like Zoom. But that helps a lot with transportation issues. If your scheduling is a little bit challenging, I know in Orlando or in Central Florida generally, if you live in Point Siena, even trying to get to our Osceola office from Point Siena is going to take you a very long time. Or if you have transportation problems, it's going to take you a very long time. So this is something that we don't expect going away anytime soon, as long as all of those governing bodies that oversee mental health counseling allow it to still happen with HIPAA compliance, and we're going to keep doing it. So that's an amazing thing that we're offering on our counseling and our therapy side. All of our acute services are still being seen face-to-face, because you have to for evidence collection. Luckily, that was already a pretty sterile environment. We're just adding those things that Emilie mentioned with temperature checks, asking people to come alone, wearing their face mask, asking them the CDC-approved questions about their symptoms and things like that. In terms of my role, I try to think about myself as, the volunteer coordinator, the outreach coordinator, and then also the social media coordinator. So on our volunteer side, we're always recruiting volunteers, and we're still recruiting volunteers. We recruit our volunteers very similarly to our employees. They come in and do a lunch and learn session normally. That used to happen in the conference room where Emilie is. We moved that virtual. So we invite anyone in the community who wants to learn more about what we do. So if you got a taste of the Victim Service Center and you want to learn more, we invite you to come to a lunch and learn, which you can learn more about on our Facebook. Once that happens, we have them do an application. It's very long. We have them do an interview with me. They do an online 30-hour training through the Florida Council Against Sexual Violence, which is that governing body that oversees rape crisis centers. So this is one of the standards. They have to do this training, which a lot of people really enjoy because you get to add that to your resume. We've moved our virtual orientations now. So instead of coming in office, we have that done in a group orientation session. And then all of our projects are done virtually. So usually if someone's comfortable working in a virtual environment, this is a great time to volunteer. In terms of outreach, like Emilie mentioned, we're doing a lot of that in tandem. We're doing a lot of Zoom meetings. We're doing a lot of podcast guests. We're trying to bring people in and give them a voice so people learn about us, and then have us go into their spaces and hear what our services are so we can still reach clients that need it. In terms of social media, Mary, you know better than anybody. Lots of social media happening right now all over the place. So we relaunched our Instagram this year, luckily. So now we have that platform. We technically have a TikTok. I really haven't branched into that.
I
Twitter.
haven't personally or professionally branched into TikTok.
I said I will make a TikTok, but I will not be in any of the TikToks.
Yeah.
As far as I will go.
No.
Facebook, all of those things. And so we also moved our silent auction fundraiser online. So I've been charged of a lot of the fundraising efforts for that too. So, I'm adapting as much as possible. Our agency is adapting as much as possible. And we're trying to still break down barriers and increase our services. The biggest thing I want people to know is that we're still here and that, the support groups are still happening. They're just done in a virtual setting. So if someone does want care, know that we're still here, still open, and we're always going to still be here for our victims.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Shannan, because I want to mention that the Cheers for Change, which is our normal gala for fundraising, had to be canceled because it happens during Sexual Assault Awareness Month in April. So Shannan has been working really, really hard to bring it online. So when is that exactly launching so that people can find out about that?
Launches Monday, August 10th at 9 a.m. and ends August 24th at 6 p.m.
Okay, perfect. And where can people find more information about that?
Primarily on our Facebook page, but go to cheerstochange.org. You can go ahead and register for the auction and see all the amazing items. But I usually encourage people to follow us on Facebook because that's usually where we have our most up-to-date events, whether you're trying to support us as a supporter or you're trying to find more services for yourself or your loved ones.
Okay. Yeah, I'll list that in the comments down below. And, of course, more of your information like your website and your social media as well, and your helpline. But yeah, that was my last question. You guys, you provided this wealth of information. Really grateful that you guys exist for our community. It's a really, really important service that you're doing. And I want to thank you for being on and talking with me today.
Thank you so much,
Thank you, Mary.
Right. It was so nice to see you. Okay. Bye.
Bye.